Hello, and welcome to another episode of Making Waves at Sea Level. My name is Thom Singer, and I actually started this podcast in 2014. How we got 12 years into this show, I don't really know. It's taken a couple of different iterations over the years, and we are coming back strong with some interviews with really interesting people that are really important for you to hear from when you're trying to manage your career. This show, we sort of focus on how do you show up as a leader? How does the C-suite really make things happen? But you can't do that in a vacuum. And today we're going to talk a little bit about stress. Now, I'm sure you're all saying, what do you mean? I'm a CEO, I'm a CIO, I'm a CFO. I don't have any stress. Said none of you. So this is actually a really important topic. And today we are joined by one of my very good friends and one of the leading researchers on stress that I know. And she has been speaking for over 20 years. She is a speaker, a stress researcher, an author, and a sailor. That's right. I've actually been out on the sailboat that she and her husband own, and they love to go sail racing out on Lake Michigan. And she has learned a lot from being a sailor when it comes to stress. As you can imagine, they have been out in storms. They've run out of fuel. They've not been able to get their anchor unlodged from a rock on the bottom. There are many things that can happen out on the water that, if you don't pay attention, if you don't manage that stress, could become dangerous. But she also has worked around businesses that are trying to go through change, and change can bring a lot of stress. And she's also a heart attack survivor, and we're going to hear that story as well. So I would like to welcome to Making Waves at Sea Level, my friend, Eliz Greene. Eliz, welcome to the show. So she actually is an expert when it comes to stress, and she uses her insights as a sailor and a heart attack survivor to show people how to manage uncertainty and unmanageable stress. And today, that's deeply where we're going to go. So Eliz, let's start off with that story, because there's not a lot of women who you say, oh, and she's a heart attack survivor,
Right.
especially one of 24 years ago. What happened? What was your heart attack all about? Because your story is somewhat unique.
It is unusual. I was 35 and 7 months pregnant with twins, thankfully in the hospital on bed rest because I was in preterm labor when I had a spontaneous dissection, which is a kind of heart attack that happens. Your cardiac artery is like a garden hose, has a couple layers to it. The inside layer peeled away, fell across the artery like a trapdoor, stopped the flow of blood, and that's what caused my heart to stop beating. As I said, fortunately, I was in the hospital at the time, was able to get great care right away. Girls were delivered 2 months early. I had open heart surgery. It's a big changing day. But that is what propelled me into sharing this weird story. I actually kind of came out of that knowing that I'd been given this weird story to tell, and that's what I've been doing for the last 20 years, using that story in the ways I found to recover and live in this world without putting more stress on my heart.
And you started your speaking business as sort of a heart health speaker. I didn't
Mhm.
realize until I met you, and that's 17 years ago, I didn't really realize that there's a lot of issues around women and heart issues. I mean, it's kind of
Right.
something you often think, oh, it's a middle-aged man my age is the person who's having heart issues. But really, women of all ages have these things. So what led you into this world of being a heart health speaker?
Well, as I said, was given this wacky story to tell, and it was at a time where women were not talking about having heart disease. There was such a stigma about that. Somehow it was, my fault that my heart had this problem. Um, but it really did feel like that because oh, I was talking about it. But it was also at a time when the American Heart Association and a lot of organizations started a campaign to educate people, including medical professionals, that women indeed do have heart attacks. And oftentimes our heart attacks came later in life because we have estrogen in our system that protects us for a while. But pregnant women, women on birth control, that sort of thing can develop heart issues earlier in life. And because our symptoms are more subtle, they tend to be dismissed.
Mm.
It's better than it used to be, but it still is something that women have to be more of an advocate for themselves when they're going into a medical environment.
So was stress part of your life? Were you one of those stress cookies before you had your heart attack?
So here's the thing. Stress isn't good or bad. It's just a reaction to your environment. I often say that life without stress would be absolutely boring because it's just a chemical reaction that happens to our environment. So if the car is cutting you off and you think you're going to get into an accident, all this stuff starts happening in your body. Your heart rate goes up, your blood pressure goes up, your blood even gets stickier should you be in that car accident. Your brain is absolutely focused on that car. But when you get out of the way and you're not in the accident, all of that reaction that cortisol in your system signals is supposed to go back down. And it's interesting because that chemical reaction that happens in the body is the same in a almost car accident as it is in a surprise birthday party. So it's not good or bad. It's just a reaction to what's in your environment. So it's not about being stressed. It's about staying stressed.
So it's interesting because you talked about life without stress would be boring.
Yeah.
And I work around a lot of tech CEOs and founders, and they get sort of a high off of, starting a business and growing a business and chasing the funding and creating new technologies. And to some extent, when you're doing that, there's stress involved, but they do get sort of that addicted to it and the
zing.
Highs of that. Yeah, it's a
zing. I
it's a
don't
thing.
do anything unless we have a deadline. Like I need that little stress in order to be motivated to do it. That there isn't anything wrong with that. It's just if we are living up here at high stress all of the time and not letting that cortisol come out of our body and our heart rate come down and our blood pressure come down, or our blood not be sticky, that's the problem. If
Right.
it's high all the time and we don't let it come down, that's when we run into heart disease.
So I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, but what are a couple of things people can do when they're at that high stress to help bring themselves down? What are a couple of the tips that you share with audiences?
Yeah, well, the first thing is to recognize that you're there. We all have physical indicators of being highly stressed. Mine lives in my gut. When I'm very stressed, I get like icky tummy, sometimes feel a little nauseous. That's an indication to me that so there is something going on and probably I should take some steps to alleviate that. So knowing what it is for you, whether you get that sort of fluttery heart rate or you get a headache, or there's lots of different symptoms, but recognizing when it's happening and then taking some steps to either decrease the load that you have of stress or do something to sort of refuel, recover from the stress you're under. So it could just be, this is why deep breathing works, right? Anytime we take a deep breath and let it out and lengthen our breath, it is a signal to our brain that something has changed and cortisol can come out of your body. That's why it works. So whether you're just sitting there and you take 4 deep breaths, or you do yoga or you meditate or whatever, that's a way of signaling your body to let go of the stress. Same works for exercise. You are getting your heart rate up, getting it up for a little while, let it coming down. That indicates to your brain, it's okay, something changed. It's time to let that cortisol go.
So what are a couple of other things that people should be aware of when it comes to this stress and actually being able to turn it off? What are a couple more tips?
So everybody has different symptoms of their stress. We're all, we all walk around in our own bodies. So recognizing what your individual need for or individual indication that you're stressed is important, but also knowing what is it going to allow you to disconnect from what's causing you stress out here so that you can recover. And we all need different things. Now, Thom knows my husband. Thom and I are married to similar people.
Yes, in fact, they share the same birthday, which when we found that out, we said, well, that answers a lot of questions of why they're the same.
So when we're on vacation, my husband needs to be highly occupied in order for him to sort of let go of all of those things that keep his brain running on stress. Whether what's going to be in his inbox, whether the thing that he delegated is going to be handled okay. It's unless he has something occupying, this keeps going and he stays stressed. He calls that being a border collie. If he's
which
not
which
occupied.
which I love that analogy, because when you think of a
Right.
border collie, they're running back and forth along the fence.
Just needs to be, we have an Australian Shepherd. She also needs to be fully occupied in order to like not be a freak. So, so he needs that sort of thing. And more on the other side, I like to sit and read my book. I like to watch the sunset. I like that quiet contemplative time. I can hang with the border collie, but I am more like an iguana who likes to sit, be warmed by the sun, just have that quiet contemplative time. Now, one isn't better than the other. The border collie isn't more efficient. The iguana isn't better at it. It just means that we need different things in order to disconnect and recover from the stress we can't avoid. And the thing is, once you have this sort of language, you can talk to each other in ways that allows you each to have that time. Because he'll say, our vacations are very much border collie vacations. We are going all the time. But he will turn to me and say, hey, we've had a border collie day. Do you need some iguana time? Yes, I do. And he can hang for a while in the iguana style. I can hang for a good while in the border collie style, but we still need that time for each of us to get what they need.
And I think that's really good advice to people who are listening, that, be true to yourself. There's not one answer. It's know who you are. So one of the analogies you use, and I sort of said this in the introduction, is about what you've learned from sailing. And, you talk about the idea of crossing the lake and where that is. Why don't you run with that?
So one of the things that's interesting about living on Lake Michigan and sailing on Lake Michigan is Lake Michigan is a huge, cold body of water. It is actually referred to as an inland sea. And to some extent, there's a level of danger, especially if you're going to go from the Wisconsin side over to the Michigan side. That's a long trip. For a lot of that, we are not in sight of land. We don't have cell service, although that is getting better, surprisingly. And we are a little bit at mercy of the lake itself. If weather comes up, if waves come up, we're out there, we're going to have to deal with it. So a lot of what we do is think about how can we prepare ourselves for a situation that can be uncertain, unpredictable. And right now, we are living in fairly uncertain, unpredictable times. Things change a lot day to day. And that, just by its very nature, causes stress. Our brains like a predictable environment. They don't like to figure out what's going on. They like to know what's happening. They like to look at a situation and say, we have been here before. I know what to do. So the more that we can make the unpredictable feel predictable to our brains, the less stress we're going to have when we get to that unpredictable time. So some of that is my husband, when the girls were 6, said to me, let's take the boat across the lake. And I said, no, that does not seem like a good idea to put our 6-year-olds on a boat and take them across the lake. But my husband is very persuasive, which is why we still get puppies. And he and I walked through what is causing me stress about the situation, what's unpredictable, what could we make feel more predictable. Now, the biggest thing that I still worry about is what if somebody falls off the boat? It is why we have the rule that everybody must wear a life jacket when we're on the boat. Now, I have to say, Thom said he was on our boat this summer. He also came in right as we were ready to leave for a race, which was fun. But I forgot to put a life jacket.
I never left the cockpit of the boat,
no.
but it was funny. Afterwards, I mentioned I wasn't in a life jacket, and Eliz was like, "Oh my God!"
Like that breaks our rule. Because it is too late to put the life jacket on when you need it.
Right.
You need to have it on before you need it. So
Yeah.
we always have
Fortunately, I'm kind of a chicken, you know what? And I was just holding on. I was sitting in the chair, just holding on. I wasn't going anywhere.
you were in a good spot. You were in a good spot. But it it is things like that that we have set up so that if somebody would to go overboard, that is a very short period of time then that we have to get them back aboard before that becomes a potentially life-threatening event, because Lake Michigan is very cold. So hypothermia, even in the middle of summer, will set in very quickly. So we have gone through the process of figuring out what do we need to have and do and practice so that if somebody were to go overboard, and so far nobody has, how would we get them back aboard? And we spent lots of time getting the things that we would need, making sure that we have a PFD. That's the first thing. My PFD, let's be serious. If somebody's going overboard, it is definitely going to be me.
What is a PFD?
A life jacket.
Oh, yeah.
Flotation device.
Personal flotation device, of course.
Yes. So mine is kind of fancy. It's very comfortable to wear because it inflates when you go in the water. If that were to happen, if that inflates, there's a little beacon that pops up, a little antenna that talks to the chart plotter, which is like the GPS in your car. And that will show a little blip that says, here's Eliz floating in the water. Let's go get her.
Now, the interesting thing with that is this is actually important for businesses too, is to be thinking ahead of what can be the uncertainties that we're facing in these uncertain times with the economy and with this. And do you have things in place? Not that you'll ever need them. You've been sailing for over 25 years and you've never quotes needed it, but you have it and it's kept up and you buy new equipment.
And we've practiced it. That's the big thing. You actually need to know what to do. And especially when it comes to change, we think about all of the things that have to happen for the change, but we often don't think about what can we control about that situation that allows our people to navigate this in a way that isn't going to just tank them because of all of the uncertainty and the stress that is associated with that. Most of the time, that is all about how do you create that security, that predictability, even though things are uncertain, that there are things in place that they can count on. So whether that is making sure they know their jobs are safe, whether that's about here are the demarcations of progress that we're going to go through so we know where we are in the process. Oftentimes it's about communication and just knowing what you need to have in place. And we spend so much time focused on things we can't control and forget to focus on the things that we could control and make feel more secure.
Nice. So is there any other examples from crossing the lake as far as, making sure that you have all the pieces in place to deal with all this?
Thom, have you ever run out of gas in your car?
I actually embarrassingly have on the side of a very busy freeway once.
It is not a good feeling.
No.
It is a worse feeling to do that miles out from the shore on a boat. Now, in terms of making that feel more predictable, we have gone through what would happen if our engine stalled for some reason. If we're close enough, we could sail in, and what would that look like? Unfortunately, we had to call the towboat to come get us. And it's embarrassing because we spent a lot of time trying to make sure we control all the things that we can control. How much fuel we have is something we can control. But here's the thing. Our fuel is in a closed stainless steel tank. Actually, it's an aluminum tank. My husband would say, it's not stainless steel. It's aluminum tank, closed. So you can't see in it and go, oh, how full is it? And for years, we've been writing down engine hours and how far we've gone and keeping track and trying to figure out how much capacity, because we know our fuel gauge is a little bit funky because the shape of the fuel tank.
My first car was a 66 Mustang, and it ran out somewhere below a quarter tank. and
Yes.
empty. And so in the back of my mind, I know a quarter tank means empty, get gas, because it was wonky. And the one time I ran out of gas, I was driving my wife's car and I just never looked.
So ours ran out somewhere between half and a quarter.
Ooh.
Yeah. So that is not helpful information. Um, that is
and,
not.
and that happens to businesses. Sometimes the
Uh-huh.
information on the dashboard isn't producing what they think it's producing.
Well, here's the thing. Our tank, the label on our tank says 36 gallons. Our manual says 36 gallons. Tom, do you know how much fuel our tank actually holds?
I bet you found out when you filled it that day.
We actually emptied the tank and then 3 gallon by 3 gallon by 3 gallon added. So we were actually calculating the capacity of the tank. 30 gallons, not 36 gallons, which means that we had 20% less capacity than we thought. Have you ever found yourself with less capacity than you thought in life?
Yeah, in life, sure. That's the story of life sometimes.
Yeah, well, I just learned a new term and I think you'll like it. It's called time optimism, which means I think I can get this amount of stuff done in the 15 minutes I have before my next meeting. No, I can't. I think a lot of us have capacity optimism. We think we can handle so much more than we actually can. And this happens in business, just in terms of, we thought we had enough staff to handle this, but we don't. Things change. It also happens individually, and especially as we reach that time of being an adult, and maybe you still are taking care of children, or your children are young adults and they still definitely need you, and parents who are needing help because they're ill or financially having difficulty or whatever. And I talk to all kinds of people where they are now working a 40-hour week job and caring for parents on a 24/7 basis and kicking themselves because they just are worn out. Nobody has that much capacity. We have to do what we can to either reduce the load or fill our tank back up by recovering from the stress we can't avoid. And I was talking to someone just last week about this, and he was saying that his health is suffering. And I know about that personally. Like when you stop doing all of the things that are sort of routine maintenance for making this work, sleeping and getting some movement of your body and eating well, all of those things that you don't do when you have a 40-hour a week job and a 24/7 care position. And he's like, I just felt bad. I needed like a break. We went away for a weekend and I just felt so bad about it. And I'm like, do you feel bad pulling into the gas station? Do you take this as a personal failure that, you have to put more gas in the car because the car no longer has the fuel that you started with? You have to do the routine maintenance. You have to put more gas in order to be able to do all of the things that are required of you. And that's not a failure. That's just maintenance.
Well, and I think it's really important what you just said, because so many of the people who listen to the show, people who I work with in the tech community, et cetera, they have that full-time job. Maybe they're the CEO, maybe they're running the business, maybe they have direct reports, and they're at that age where they have aging parents. And it's a full-time job. I mean, when my father was in his last years, he lived down the street from my brother, and I don't know how my brother held it together. He did not have the capacity. He somehow stitched it all together. But it's a lot of work, and we don't talk about that in the business world, and we don't talk about the stress that it brings into the workplace. And so, what are ways when you're out of capacity? What are ways to be able to do that? Like your one friend, they went away for the weekend. What are some other ways to make sure you're giving yourself that break to fill the tank?
Right. So some of the things we've already talked about, like just noticing that you're worn out, like you have no more gas in the tank, is the first step. Then doing something about it, whether that is taking some of that load off, getting somebody to come in and help. And let's be serious, it's not only aging parents that are a problem. Sometimes it's young kids. Sometimes it's just life transitions, going through a breakup or a divorce. All kinds of things can add this extra load on you that that just makes it's a draw on your capacity.
And as leaders who are listening to this, one of the things is it's not just about you. Who on your
Right.
team, who on your team has no more gas in their tank? And are you
Right.
aware of it? And are you honoring that?
Yeah, one of the things that I really discovered in my research for my book was that really great leaders have small little conversations with their people. They find out that mom has been ill, and you do that first thing like, oh, I'm sorry to hear your mom's ill, but like put it in your calendar for 3 weeks down the road just to go and say, how are things going? How are you doing? Maybe there's some flexibility. Can they work from home for a little while? What is the thing? And just acknowledging that you see the struggle, that they're holding down the job, they're doing what they need to do, but they're also having this pressure from the outside, just makes people feel better. High performers in particular need to be seen and valued. If they are seen and valued, boy, they will walk through fire for their leaders.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. One of the things that I love that you talk about, because it overlaps with what I talk about, is you talk about one of the ways to manage the stress and to be able to deal with these tough times is really having a bench of people who you can count on.
Right.
And, I talk about this whole idea that in this world where things are getting faster and faster and more technology, human interaction, which I call HI, in an AI driven world, it's more important than it's ever been. And all of the studies show that people have less friends than they used to. I'm forgetting the exact numbers, but just 25 years ago, I think it was like women used to say they had 7 or 8 close friends they could count on, and men said they had 5 or 6 close friends they could count on. And today's studies show that those numbers are more than half lower. So people have less people sort of on the bench who they can turn to. It's that, if you ran out of gas, who would you call? And it used to be we just socially had more people in our lives, but because we're becoming more disconnected and more lonely and more separated by technology, people don't have those types of relationships. Why does having that bench matter?
Well, here's the thing, and I think you're absolutely right. I hear about that all the time, that having close personal relationships is harder now. It's hard as an adult to even make friends sometimes. Um, but well, I'm just going to talk about how we're friends, Thom. So Thom and I are part of a 4-person mastermind group that has been together for, I don't know what, 100
11 years.
11 years.
11
It's
years.
been together for a long time. And we started out as a business group. We were working on our professional speaking businesses together. It's kind of like a board of directors. But that quickly changed because, like stress, your business is not separate from your personal life. It all happens at the same time. Work and life happen all together. They can't balance one another out. That's a whole different story. But this group, this foursome, we called ourselves Bat Signal. And that means at any given time, we can do it. We can call the whole group, or we can call an individual person. And when that phone rings, that you're going to pick it up because maybe Thom needs me, or maybe Jess needs me.
That's right. Because if you live in Gotham City and you shine the bat signal into the clouds, what happens? Batman comes to the rescue.
Yeah, Batman's coming. And so having that group of friends has been monumentally good for my business. I didn't realize how important it was going to be to me personally in my health until too long ago, when my mom has been very ill for pretty much the last little over 2 years. And she kind of she has problems, and then she is okay for a while. And we've been back and forth and back and forth. And at this point, she had gone in for what was supposed to be a simple procedure, but that landed her in the emergency room. And the only place they had to put her was the ICU. So she's in the ICU in the hospital where everything happened to me, which is a
Same
very
same same hospital, same ICU as your heart
same
attack and
hospital, same
birth of
care.
the twins.
Yes. And that's a weird place to be, but I'm taking care of my mom, so I'm really not thinking about that. She's getting better. She's going to go home. We're just waiting for her hemoglobin to get high enough. And so she went off to have a test, and I came out of the ICU. I was going to go get something to eat, and I realized I'm in this weird little hallway from the ICU to the rest of the hospital. And it's odd because it's white and it's lit from one side. It seems like windows and daylight, but it's not because it's an interior hallway, but it has these panels, so it looks like daylight all the time. And I'm walking down this hallway, and I have this vivid memory of being in a wheelchair going to meet my girls for the first time 17 hours after I had open heart surgery. The nurse had come in that morning and said, I have a 12-hour shift. If you do everything I say, I will take you to see your girls, which I didn't think was possible because I had tubes and all kinds of stuff all over me. But there I was going to see the girls for the first time. We go up there and we meet Callie, who is just tiny, 3 pounds, 15 ounces. And she puts her little hand around my finger and like just unbelievably tiny little fingernails, like fascinating. And we go over and meet Grace, and I look at her and I turn to my husband and I'm like, does she have red hair? Because it was just a dusty, she does definitely have red hair. So that's what I'm thinking about as I'm walking down this hallway, and all of a sudden my phone beeps and I pull it out and I'm looking at it and it says, you have new test results. And I have been stalking my mom's app, medical app. So she's up, let's see how she's doing. And then I figure out that it is not her results, it's my result. And because I've had damage to my heart and I'm getting older, thank you, menopause, my numbers have changed and my doctor is keeping a very close eye on things. So every quarter I have new blood work, and here are the results. And in every single case, they're all in the red. They're in the bad zone. Cholesterol's high, blood sugar's high. Everything that I have been working for years to avoid, all of these risk factors that I know means that I have put my heart in peril, are bad. And in that moment, I was no longer thinking about meeting the girls for the first time. I was in the moment of recognizing that after waking up and coming out and the doctors telling me that my heart had a part that no longer beat, and that was something they didn't know how it was going to affect the rest of my life. And that uncertainty and that fear all of a sudden started bubbling up. And I was in that fear moment, but I also recognized that I am here taking care of my mom and I can't do that right now. And I pushed all of that down, took some deep breaths, and figured out I'm just going to deal with that later, which is probably why all of those numbers are not looking good. But I knew I was going to have to talk to somebody about that. And I knew I couldn't go home and talk to my husband and make him relive the worst day of his life. My mom's in the hospital. My sister's dealing with my mom. So I thought, I'm going to have to throw out the bat signal. And for some reason, I knew Jess and Jerry were traveling, but I knew Thom was home. So on my way home, I called Thom. And he picks up the phone, cheerful as he normally is. And I said, Thom? I'm pretty sure he knew from that moment that I was in an emotional state. And I said, I need to say some things out loud. I need you to listen to them. Can you do that for me right now? And he said, are you still driving? And I said, no, I'm not. I have already pulled over. And then he said, go ahead. And so I dumped all of the fear, all of the stress, all of the uncertainty, all of the things that I was holding deep inside. And then, sniffled and said, that's it. That's all of it. And he said, I have this friend. Actually, you said, thank you for telling me that. And then you said, I have this friend who wrote a book. Oh, shoot, I should have had it here. With a balloon on the front about how to handle stress and uncertainty, which of course he's talking my book, which made me laugh really hard because he knew that's what I needed. And then he said, what did you tell me last month when I called you? And I said, we know what to do. We've been here before. We'll go together. And that is the magic. When you have friends, when you have people on this weird, wacky, curvy, rocky path that we all walk, who will walk that path with you, and when you slip off, will grab your hand and pull you back on again, that is the magic that makes all of this so much easier to do. So when you think about who is your bat signal, who could you pick up the call and know that they're going to take it and be there for you? Do me a favor, just thank them for that today. But think about how many people do you have on your bench? I had to go 4 deep that day. How many people do you have on your bench? And what do you need to invest to put more people on your bench so that when you need them, they will be there for you?
Yeah. And I mean, I think, along the lines of what we talked about, I think it is so important to have those people who, will take the call and listen to the vent.
Yep.
And then make you laugh or whatever it is you need in that moment.
Right.
I mean, when I told my wife that was my answer, she goes, "You didn't say you wrote the book on this." And I'm like, "I did, and it was the right thing to say."
It was the right thing to say. And at that moment, if you were the bat signal, if you're picking up the phone and you're listening to somebody's pain, the right answer is always, thank you for trusting me. Thank you for sharing that with me. That sounds like a lot because most of the time, all anybody needs is the validation that you are experiencing emotions that are completely normal for the situation you're in. Like, that's a lot. I understand why you're upset. If that is all you say, you have given such a gift.
Well, and the reason I love that story is because it reminds people, because I love that story because I'm the hero of the story. No, I love the story because it's a reminder that we think of stress. And when we think of stress, we think we're all alone. I've been in parts of stress where I think I don't have a bench. I have a bench. But when you're in the stress, you don't think of the fact that all those relationships you build along the way, you talk about our mastermind group, people are like, I tell people all the time is I'm as close to these 3 people as I am to my 3 siblings. And I'm pretty close to my 3 siblings. But the point is that real relationships are built through shared experiences. And I think that people don't think when they're sharing experiences with people and having fun and building their business and doing things like that, those people are also the same people who will be there for you in the rough times. Yeah. And so what I have found about what I teach is it is the baseline for or a piece that connects to people who speak on leadership, people who speak on stress, people who speak on time management, people who speak on all these different topics. All opportunities in life come back to people. And I think that's the part that I love about the way you teach people about stress is it's not go be the long ranger and press those feelings down and, there's some magic fairy dust. It's that all aspects of your life are weaved into the stress you're facing, but it's those same threads that are the way to get out of the stress that you're in.
I want to share one more thing, especially with the leaders who are listening. As highly capable people, we are often unprepared to deal with things we can't solve. That's why dealing with your parents being ill is so hard, is most of the time we can't fix it. And if we live in a place where you're the fixer, you're the boss, you're the leader, you're the coach, and you can't fix it, that is a vulnerable, horrible feeling. And if all you do is white knuckle through it and keep it inside, it will eat you alive. You will be surprised if you talk to a trusted friend or even somebody that you don't know all that well, just saying, yeah, it's been really hard. My mom's been very ill. Guess what? You are not alone.
Yeah,
There's
absolutely.
so
Absolutely.
many of us that are going through that or have experienced something similar. Allowing people to see all of you as opposed to just the sturdy leader can be a blessing to the people who trust you and support you, to allow them to actually be part of your life.
So you started off as a women's heart health speaker, but over the last 7 or 8 years, you've transformed into being one of the leading stress experts, talking to organizations from tech companies to government officials to hospitals to NASA and to large corporations, because stress impacts everybody. And I think it's interesting because when you think about, company organizations like NASA, if you're stressed and a decision is made, the consequences can be hard if the stress isn't allowing you to make the best consequence. So you talk to major corporations and organizations kind of all over the country and beyond. If somebody's listened this far into this episode and they're like, my people need the message. Yeah, my people need the message that was just shared. How do they find you, and what type of work do you do with companies and other organizations?
Best place to find me is my website. It's my name, elizgreene.com, and it's all of the E's, ELIZGREENE, all of the E's.com. And so the way I work is oftentimes I'm brought in for an all hands meeting or a sales kickoff, or because there is change going on or change predicted, to sort of preempt and prepare people. Or you're in the midst of it, or a lot of places bring me in because they recognize that their work environment has stress just baked in. So you talked about NASA, that's a place where stress is baked in, but there's lots of places, engineering firms where that RFP process is just ongoing and it's a big grind and it's just constant. And there's not that let up, like, oh, now we get to relax. If your environment is just constantly churning, call centers, lots of places are like that. That's a good place for me. I love that. And giving people real tools that will actually work, that are on both sides of the equation, Border Collie and Iguana, and not just looking at stress one way.
Nice. And they can find you at elizgreene.com. Eliz, thank you so much for jumping in and being part of Making Waves at Sea Level today. Any last words?
Thom's amazing.
Those are good last words. All right. Thank you very much for being here. And thank you to everybody who tuned in and listened. I say it every time. If it wasn't for the audience, why would we do the podcast? I can't believe that this show is about to have its 14th birthday in just like 29 days from the time this was recorded, maybe 30 days. It was the last day of September. It actually was the first or second annual podcast day. And I think it's September 30th was the day I launched the show. I intentionally waited to launch it until podcast day. And so that's been going on for 14 years. I'm excited to be back now almost every week, bringing more interviews and exciting things. So make sure, if you've listened all the way through these 45 minutes, that you tell your friends about this show, because somebody needs the message that Eliz just shared. So, hit that little thing on wherever you get your podcast that says share with a friend, because somebody probably has a little bit of stress and they need to learn how to manage that. We're going to be back next week with another interview with somebody just as interesting. I know you're thinking, how will you find anybody this interesting? But we do it every single time. Just as interesting as Eliz Greene. Thank you for subscribing to Making Waves at Sea Level.